Hi, I bet you've turned on and you're thinking, hello, what's this bald, wrinkly old scrote going to ramble on about? He's not exactly George Clooney, is he? He's not exactly Sir David Attenborough. No, you're dead right. But can I ask you to keep watching for a few minutes? Why, you might ask? Well, because I say things which most people don't seem to be saying. Why, I don't know. You've clicked on here because you care about wildlife, so do I. I'm passionate about it. I don't need to tell you how drastic the decline in our wildlife in terms of the number of individuals and the range of individuals. Our wildlife is in trouble. It's been declining for decades. I'm old enough to have seen it myself. I'm not telling you anything new. That's not the point. The point that I make is that what tends to happen is people throw their hands up in the air and they say, oh dear, it's dreadful, isn't it? What can we do? There is plenty we can do. The trouble is we're not doing it, and that's the purpose of this channel. There's an awful lot that can be done that will make a big impact, but we need to do it now. We cannot allow this decline to keep on going. I've seen it myself year after year and nothing changes. Some things get better. There are some organisations which halt the decline in some species, but overall the decline continues. Now stay with me, because I have some answers which may not be palatable to all, but I think we need to think about them at the very least. Okay, welcome to Ultimate Wildlife Gardens. My name's Chris Caligari. Now, believe it or not, you might well believe it, this is actually the fourth version of this video which I've made. The reason, it isn't because technically there's a problem, although I admit that I'm not exactly au fait with all of the tech involved. It's nothing to do with anything technical. It's because when I've come to edit the videos afterwards, I found that I've tended to fall in the same trap as most other wildlife channels, most other television programs, etc. And my videos were simply pussyfooting around. They were not hitting the mark. They were not being blunt enough. They were just not hitting the mark. And the last thing we want to do is have another wildlife channel which is really skirting around the issues. So to make sure this time that I do stay on subject, that I am blunt enough, I've brought alongside an alter ego of mine with a lot more hair, who will make sure that I, Chris, stay as blunt as possible. His name is John Blunt. John, I'm going to ask you a question now. Are we doing anything like enough at the moment to help our wildlife? Are we fork in hand? I say no, we're most certainly not. What we're doing is lamentably pathetic. Chris, you're the ecologist. Tell them like it is. What are the problems? Yeah, so we can all accept easily enough that we're just not doing enough. And the reason we're not doing enough is because we have an ingrained ethos in virtually all of us, which has been inherited from generations, going back hundreds, maybe thousands of years, of managing the land in a certain way. And we just aren't breaking away from it. If we don't break away from it, we're in trouble. One of the most important things which I see around me, and I'm sure you'll see it in your neighbourhood as well, one of the biggest killers for wildlife is tidiness. I see people being tidy, and it is a huge mistake in so many cases. There are instances where, for example, a most wonderful churchyard, excellent for wildlife, being managed for the scheme that they call God's Own Acre was undertaken by new managers, and it was tidied. And without exaggeration, I would say that more than 90% of the biodiversity of that churchyard has been lost within a matter of months. The nest boxes that were there, the long grass that was there, the ivy that was there, the huge benefits to wildlife were lost. If we don't change our thinking, we're in big trouble and we'll make zero progress. And that's what's been going on for decades, and that's what we need to change. Okay, are we getting blunt enough, John? Yeah, that's more like it, Baldy. You've got to be blunt. You've got to be very blunt. Otherwise, the whole thing is pointless. Now, go on. Go on, build on that. Be as blunt as you like. If you're not going to be blunt, there's no point doing it. Yeah, you're right, John. The unpalatable truth is that virtually all gardens are not good for wildlife. I know it's not popular to say that, but that's true. Most channels, TV programs, magazines, they all start with the assumption that the garden, our gardens, are going to remain virtually the same, and so we tinker around at the edges. And what we really need is a totally different mindset. I can give you a particular example. In the UK here, we have a scheme which quite a few people adopt, which is called No Mow May. The name makes it fairly clear what it is. It's simple enough that you don't mow your lawn, which is normally close cut grass, during the month of May, or maybe a little bit longer, so that things like daisies and clovers and dandelions can flower, which will benefit pollen and nectar feeding insects. Yeah, that's good. It helps. It shows that people care, which is really, really important, and it does help some of those insects. That's true. But is it enough? It is not. Is it anything like enough? No, it isn't. Reason? Because it doesn't create habitats. I'd say it's a bit like calling in at a service station when you're on a long journey. You have a little bit of a refresher, and that's very nice, but what you're not doing is creating habitats, and that's where it all comes, that's where the benefit should lie. It is a similar thing with bird feeding, putting up bird boxes, all manner of activities like that. Please don't stop. They're good things to do. Yes, they help, but are they an answer? Are they enough? You cannot be serious, man. You cannot be serious. Yeah, so of course it's not good enough. What do you think, John? Chris, that's clear enough. It's clearly nothing like enough that we're doing. It's a bit like you've got a refugee from a war-torn area, got absolutely nothing, and you say to them, well, here you are, here's a couple of quid, pop round the corner to a Starbucks. It's a nice gesture, it's a step in the right direction, it helps, but they need somewhere to live. And these things that we're doing, they do help, they're good intentions, but they're nothing like enough. If we take blue tits, for example, yeah, we feed them, which is great, but they need somewhere to nest. Okay, we might even provide them with nest boxes, but they shouldn't really be bringing their young up on food which they're getting from the bird table, from their feeders. They really need caterpillars. A family of blue tits will need thousands of caterpillars to rear healthy young ones. So it's just not enough. But Chris, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself? Do you know what you're talking about? Are you doing this? Are you talking through your own arsehole? Tell them. Good point. I think I do have a good idea what I'm talking about. I was a graduate ecologist, and I did postgraduate work beyond that. I've also taught quite extensively and lectured in ecology, environmental science, etc. And then from the 1990s. I was a professional garden designer, and I've done that for many years, as the wrinkles will probably show. In addition to that, I've had my own wildlife areas for, must be the last 40 years. A lot of the garden designs I've done have been, should we call them, normal, traditional. I have designed wildlife gardens for those clients that want them, but generally speaking, my bread and butter was ordinary, shall we say, garden design. So I should have some idea what I'm talking about. My own wildlife area I've established here about 2 or 3 years. It's getting well established, and I think it will prove interesting for you to see. Now, that's just to dispel the idea, in case you think that I'm perhaps some kind of hippie. Hi man, peace and love. Leave the wildlife alone, man. No, a hippie I'm not. This isn't based on some sort of up high in the sky idealism. It really works, and the idea is, if we can get down to the nitty gritty of what this channel's about, it is supposed to be, it will be, an inspirational and practical guide to putting these things that we're talking about into practice, actually making a real difference. Now, it doesn't matter about how big the garden is. In fact, I prefer to not refer to gardens so much as spaces for wildlife, because it might be your garden, it might be part of your garden, it might be a churchyard, allotment, it could be any space for which you have responsibility. It might be small, it might be large, it might be an estate, it might be a farm. Wherever it is, if the mindset is right, there's an awful lot we can do, and we can make a difference really, really quickly. It does work. This is going to apply whatever part of the world you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in towns, in the countryside, it doesn't matter where you are. Now this project, this channel, I call it project, is going to be filmed virtually entirely, as I say, in my own wildlife area. It's only been established 2 or 3 years. I bought a building plot, I built a passive house on it, but really I've only given attention to the wildlife area in the last 2 or 3 years. But it is very successful. It's providing habitats for lots of animals, and they do actually live there. They don't visit there, and that's the important distinction. They live there. Things such as grass snakes, slowworms, moles, voles, shrews, no end of different animals that we'll come across. Most of the output of the channel will be practical. I know this one is theoretical, a lot of me talking, etc., because that's important, that we're going to go on a journey, but we need a bit of an introduction of why we're going on that journey and where we're going to. It is my garden. It's great for wildlife, but it's a managed space because I have to live here, so I have to have spaces for vehicles, washing, for social activities, for all the purposes that we need a garden. Growing my own vegetables, we try and be self-sufficient. So my space here is for everything, but the filming will largely be in the wildlife area. It's not a wilderness. We're not talking about turning everything just naturally wild, because in a practical setting, gardens and many spaces, to make them ideal for wildlife, will need a little bit of management. The emphasis, though, is upon increasing biodiversity, and we're doing that through habitat creation. It's really important distinction, and if I may, I'll just turn you over to John Blunt to give you an example of what we're doing and what we're not doing, which I think will make it clear. John. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about bats. what tends to happen, but bats are lovely animals, everybody loves them. We know that they've declined in their numbers enormously. It's really worrying. They're super animals. If one looks at many video channels, gardening programs, magazines, etc., you will get tips on what to do for bats. We know the threats, we know the problems, we know about changes in agricultural practices, decline in insect numbers, loss of nesting sites, of brooding sites, etc., etc. We know very well about why bats have declined, or at least we think we do. But what will tend to happen on many video channels, programs, is you'll be told about how to make bat boxes, and they help a lot. They're good. If you do that, great, that helps. You might even have mention of ponds, because those are very good for encouraging insects upon which they feed. But I have a major problem with it, and that is they're not really addressing the net cause of the problem, or one of the main causes for decline in bat numbers, which is the radical decline in insect numbers. And if we start dealing with that, starting to look at the ecology of the bat, then we need habitats which are going to lead to a good variety of flying insects which are essential to them. Now, so let us say, for example, that we put a pond in. That's a good thing to do. We'll increase the insect numbers. We will not use chemicals of any kind. That also will help. But what tends not to get mentioned are the other very important things which we will do. For example, installing grasslands. Maybe wildflowers, maybe not. But we'll have areas where grassland can be established, and having done that, then the insect numbers will go up because we're increasing the biodiversity of the area. So that's great. You will help bats. But it takes us on to the logical thinking. It's also going to help loads of other animals and plants. So if we have grassland, we'll be helping the bats, yes, but we'll also be hugely increasing the area's value for things like hedgehogs, slowworms, grass snakes, countless butterflies, countless moths, etc., etc., etc. So the whole point of the thing is that we are taking an ecological approach. So in this channel, in general, we won't be saying, oh, what about bats? We'll deal with bats on this particular video, or we'll be dealing with slowworms on this particular video. Generally speaking, that's not the direction that this channel wants to go in, because that is tinkering on the edges, and we don't want to go down that path. We want to be talking about increasing biodiversity, and we want to be talking about ecology and the fact that we need to be providing habitats with native plants. We want to get away with the idea of closely mowed lawns, gardens containing plants which do not belong in this country. Now, there's another video where I go into a little bit more detail, but obviously plants from different countries, there's very few creatures which can depend upon them. They might use some for nectar or pollen, but then we're back again to the Starbucks sort of service station. That's not enough to really help the species. Back to you, Chris. Thank you, John. So, I think you've gained the right sort of impression that if you're serious about helping wildlife, and you're prepared to adopt this mindset if you haven't got it already, which you may have, this channel's for you. But I do warn you, well, I think I mentioned earlier on, that I am very direct. I need to be direct. I cannot pussyfoot around. So when I say that the majority of gardens virtually every garden really isn't good for wildlife, lots of people are going to say, oh, but that doesn't apply to my garden. I've got nest boxes, I feed the birds, I this, I that. I'm afraid it is a harsh truth that most gardens are not good for wildlife, virtually every garden, and that's where the action needs to take place. So I am very direct, I'm not pussyfooting around. Okay, why am I here? I'm here basically out of a sense, I guess, of frustration, because nothing has been happening. I put on a garden at Chelsea in 2003 called Room for Wildlife, which was basically plugging this very message. Did it do any good? I think it made about that much difference to wildlife. It was sponsored by Stone Market, an excellent company with good green credentials, and I'm forever grateful to them. It was a major show garden, cost a lot of money, gained a lot of publicity, but I think the publicity was really for people who are pretty much conventional gardeners. So it was quite successful in one way, but not in the way that I wanted, because what we need is people like you. Our wildlife needs people like you and I who are prepared to make real differences. So I'm here out of a sense of frustration that nothing has happened that helps wildlife to speak of on a sort of national or world basis for decades, and things just keep getting worse and worse. And the worst of it is, the bit that really annoys me, you can probably see the steam coming off my bald pate, is that it's really easy. It's not difficult. It's not rocket science. It's always going to work. Why aren't more of us doing it? I don't frankly know. I'm hoping you will help me. That's what this channel is about. I'm not in this thing for fame and fortune. I've retired from garden designing. That's not what I'm in it for. I'm in it for one reason, and one reason only. I'm in it for the benefit of wildlife, and I am absolutely confident that you're only watching this old geezer here because you feel the same way. And that is so heartwarming, and that's what I'm here for. I want to connect with like-minded people. I have a basic philosophy which you don't have to agree with to subscribe to the channel, and that is that we have one world. It is for us and all the rest of the wildlife, and we do not and should not have dominion over the whole world and all the animals and plants on it. We're a part, and we should live alongside our wildlife. It's not for our wildlife to try and fit in around us. I feel that wildlife has an equal right to its space to exist as we do. If you're prepared to take action, perhaps you are already, then please join me on this channel. It is mainly about mindset. There's nothing difficult about it. I suppose immediately the greatest thing I would like you to do is, if you've enjoyed the channel and think it's worthwhile, if you would press the like button, subscribe to the channel, because that will help me and us to grow the channel and to grow our influence and thus help wildlife. And also, if you could, to share it. I live a bit of a hermit's life, so sharing is not a thing that I'm all that good at, but you are possibly different. If you could share it so that we put the word out amongst as many people as possible, that would help greatly. Okay, this is Ultimate Wildlife Gardens. We're going to be producing videos all the time. I'd be very grateful if you'd watch them. There will always be a bit of fun involved with it, because wildlife gardening, wildlife in general, is a joyous, wonderful, happy thing, and I like it to be that way. I got a bit of a sense of humour, and I think we need it to get us through. We'll be producing videos about all sorts of aspects of habitat creation, making things better for wildlife. So it will be things like grasslands, wildflowers, wildflower meadows, hedges, fences, trees, ponds. We will be covering them all. I'll cover them as quickly as I can get the videos out there. Thanks ever so much for watching, and see you next time. Thanks, bye.